Hey y'all, welcome to Detoxicity, a show about progressive masculinity. I'm the show's host and producer, Mike Joseph. If you enjoy what you're hearing on the show, I kindly ask that you smash the subscribe button on whichever platform you're using to listen. Also, please don't hesitate to rate, comment, and recommend. If you have someone in your life that could get something out of the conversations we're having here, tell them about the show. Also, feel free to follow me on social media. I'm DetoxPod Guy on Instagram and Tis Mike Joseph, that is TIS Mike Joseph, on Twitter. You can even email me, detoxpod@gmail.com. Don't hesitate to reach out if you know someone who might be interested in being interviewed on the show, or if you have any other ideas or constructive criticism. Most importantly, I thank you very much for listening. Stay well. Jesse Stanford, like many of the guests on Detoxicity, does many things. By day, he's a junior high school teacher. By night, he's a creative, making music under the name Lesser Sparrow. New music coming out August 13th. He's also a brand new dad. You'll find out how he juggles those things during our conversation. You'll also find out how he has moved past his suburban upbringing to learn more about the world, how he's moving past his own sensitive temperament to listen to helpful criticism and become a better person, and how he moves past his own self-doubt to make music. A lot of forward motion here. Let's listen into what Jesse has to say.
My name is Jesse. I feel like the first thing I just have to say is I'm an artist. That feels like the most true, although I do a lot of different things. A musician. I also am a teacher. I teach middle school. I'm a new dad.
Congratulations.
Thank you so much. It's probably my new favorite job.
I take it that to mean you haven't been peed or pooped on yet.
I've been peed and pooped on, but she's just so fucking cute, man.
Right on.
And yeah, that's me. New Yorker for almost 10 years.
So where'd you grow up?
So I grew up in Connecticut. I grew up outside of Hartford, Connecticut. It was, by all accounts, a pretty idyllic setting. Great family, loving family, good schools, trees, suburbia. But it's interesting to reconcile that with realizing that I just really hated it.
You know, a lot of people who grow up in those types of environments say that they dislike it. Why did you dislike your environment?
It's been an interesting journey with that question, because I've thought about it at different parts of my life. And I think at the time, growing up there, I didn't fit in. I wasn't gelling with this place. And so I was naturally just thinking, it's on me. I'm like a shy, weird kind of kid.
What made you weird, though? Was it something that you're looking at now retroactively? Or in the moment where you like, holy shit, I'm a fucking weird ass?
No, I think, again, it's kind of like my internal voice growing up. I think the biggest thing that I was dealing with then was anxiety. Okay. And a lot of social anxiety, which I've made some real significant gains on. But back then it was really, really tough. It was really tough for me to just feel comfortable. And I think what I've realized, it was actually like a really empowering kind of realization that I've only really kind of come to recently, relatively recently, is taking those feelings off and that responsibility of not feeling like I fit in off myself. And that it's just that place, Farmington, Connecticut, it's just not my place. It's not my people. It's not my tribe. And I think it was moving to New York and finding my people that I realized I need to stop being so hard on myself about why that time was difficult for me and why I didn't feel like I really clicked. And I just don't have that sort of like, oh, that's my hometown, it's my home. Let's go.
That small town hometown that John Milton can't prize.
Yeah, which it has a lot of that, you know? I mean, homecoming, football games, all that stuff. But I could never really connect with it. And I moved to New York because I'm an artist, a musician, and I wanted to be around more, and I wanted to pursue it on a bigger, grander scale. And that's what I thought as I was making that move. And while all those things are true, I think the real reason why I moved was because I was looking for my people. And I was looking for my community. I was looking for diversity.
I take it
Yeah.
Farmington, Connecticut is not the most diverse
No.
place in the world.
Not at all.
And I say that with no malice, and B, with no knowledge of what that particular... I mean, the parts of Connecticut that I've been in have been fairly white.
Yeah.
So...
It sounds about white.
Yeah, okay. Just making sure.
No, it's in the somewhat recent past where I think so many of us have been really dissecting our pasts and what we were brought up to believe, and again reconciling with, like, it was another thing that instinctually that made me uncomfortable that I couldn't name at the time.
Right, because I was going to ask, is that something that you were able to identify when you were young, or is it something that you couldn't put your finger on back then, but as you get older and you develop the language?
Yeah, definitely more of the latter for sure. And again, that's something that contributed to me feeling, ultimately, like, leading me towards feeling better about myself.
Sure.
Because I put so much pressure on myself and so much of the blame of why I didn't really enjoy. And I don't want to make it sound like I had no fun. Of course, I had a great group of friends. Few, but great. But yeah, there was just like that unnameable part of your soul that just isn't being fulfilled. And it just wasn't there. And part of it, too, was just being uncomfortable with how cookie cutter and homogenous everything really felt. And growing up in Connecticut, I was only 2.5 hours away from New York.
That can be a big gap.
My buddy and I used to take the bus down, and we'd go to a bunch of record shops in the city and buy, like, bootleg Beastie Boy CDs.
Sure.
And I didn't have a record player at the time, but still loved to look through and just, like, marvel at all the different albums. And it was just a palpable feeling walking around Bleecker Street, just like, oh shit.
So
like,
you knew that you needed to get out of where you were.
Yeah.
Were you formulating a plan already, or was it just this feeling that I shouldn't be here, I want to be there?
It was a little bit of both. For a while, like going through high school, I felt like it was more of a pipe dream. I didn't have a lot of, like, opportunities to see the avenues there, even though they were plenty. I just, like, had trouble seeing it. But I think as I started to grow as an artist in Connecticut, that was, like, such a obviously pivotal moment for me in just self-realizing, self-actualization, getting in front of people for the first time and playing my guitar, and there being that back and forth. And getting positive feedback even in those early open mic days. And that grew, okay, yeah, maybe that is the avenue and that's the reason to be in New York, making it work. So, yeah, I think music and art was the spark to get me to find where I belonged.
Okay. When did art... was there a conscious... There must have been, right? Like a conscious decision that I wanted to be an artist. That I wanted to... When did that happen? When did you decide to pick up a guitar or pick up a whatever and decide that you wanted to express yourself artistically?
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't think there was like a seminal moment. It was sort of this slow evolution that started with guitars being around the house.
Okay.
My mom played a little bit. My grandmother, her mom was a piano teacher and a guitar teacher. So there was definitely music.
Oh, yeah.
And from an early age. And my parents played a lot of music, so they had a record collection. So I definitely immediately listening to the Beatles and classic rock and Joni Mitchell and all that stuff certainly made its way in. And I remember that I used to pick up the guitar and just like mime my CDs. You know, yeah, super cute.
That's kind of adorable.
It is kind of adorable. Although I was really awkward with like huge glasses, so if you actually saw me, you wouldn't have the same adorable feelings, perhaps. But yeah, so I think it was really like the end of high school. It was interesting. I was playing. Then I actually started to teach myself and learn. I didn't really take lessons. I was sort of blessed with a pretty good musical ear.
That's a gift.
One I'm really grateful for.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think it's gotten to me where I am. I don't know how to read music. I know no theory. Musicians who I sometimes collaborate with, I drive them crazy because I have no language to speak to them. I'm just like, what I'm doing.
Do this thing.
So it has its drawbacks, but it came really natural, and that was exciting. Because I hadn't really found something like that before, especially being in a place where I didn't feel a lot of acceptance or community. I was like, okay, like this feels good.
This is something that I can bond with.
Yeah, exactly. But even that took a long time for me to be like, this is my thing and this is who I am and this is what I want to do. So it was a huge time just being in my bedroom learning the Beatles songbook or Nick Drake songs. And I think it was at the beginning of college, a friend took me to an open mic. And I had no intentions of playing, and I didn't play. But there was one in Hartford. There was, and still is, a somewhat small artistic community. And that was the first time that I'd seen that side of where I lived. That was really exciting. And it was just a seminal moment for me. As I watched people play, I was like, I'm better than that.
You say that so haltingly, with hesitation.
Well, I mean, that's unfortunately a personality trait.
I get it.
That, to a fault, I can be really humble. But I think I was trying to sort of mimic the realization in the moment that, again, there was always sort of a distance between what I could do and what was happening out there as far as like New York and art. And I grew up feeling like there's that and then there's me, and I couldn't bridge that gap.
Sure.
And that first open mic, I think, really started to bridge that gap. So I'm seeing these artists and I'm seeing these musicians and these poets, and they have this confidence that I haven't figured out yet. But it was big. It was like, oh, I can do this. And I came back the next week and did it, and I literally didn't stop playing music in front of people since forever.
You just went ahead and did it.
I did it.
There was no like, oh shit, no thought process of I'm gonna get in front of people and do this thing and this is frightening, nothing like that?
I mean, yes, but the counter feeling, the whatever that was pushing me was so much stronger.
Gotcha.
Which was, again, a really new feeling, but it was really exciting because I hadn't felt that before. I think that was a real turning point for me, and I'm sure it was very shaky. I don't know.
I mean, no one's first performance is perfect.
Of course. Yeah, it was an interesting experience, but it was big, and it became this really cool feedback loop of like, okay, I want to have something to play the next time for next week, so I'm going to write something, and then I go and play and get a good response, so that makes me want to keep going, and so it organically built, and it was like, okay, maybe I should be playing with other people, and it just kind of, it went from there.
So did writing your own music come into the picture before or after that?
It came pretty quickly because I was never really good, and I've never been really good. I always wanted to be that person who could either pick up a guitar or plop down on a piano with a bunch of people and do the sort of jukebox thing where I just could lead sing-alongs and stuff, but I never had like the knack to, or the patience to, after sort of like teaching myself on some basic songs, I never really had the patience to learn a lot of other people's songs, and I was really quickly drawn to make my own, because if I wrote my own song, then I would play it perfectly.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right. You play it the way you want it heard.
Yeah, exactly. And no one could be like, oh, like, that's not how you play that.
Right.
Because I have never been a very technical musician. It's so much about feel. And I realized that I could get to the heart of what I was good at and my talent. And I'm actually just realizing this right now.
I like you're having an illuminating moment.
I am. I'm realizing that that's why I did it, because I had a very early instinct of what I was good at, and it was writing, both lyrics and coming up with melodies. And I think I realized, learning somebody else's songs doesn't really showcase that as much as if I just do something myself.
Sure.
Huh. Cool.
Yeah.
Thanks, man.
Wow. Happy to help. Inadvertently. Your lyrics are personal.
Yes.
Do you ever feel weird exposing?
Yes. Yes.
The first time I listened to your music, I was like, all right, this dude has feelings. And, I mean, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. I mean, the premise of this show is dudes having feelings.
Yes.
I guess there's a couple of questions that come from that. Where do those feelings come from? And at what point did you say, I'm going to put my feelings into this music? And how does it feel hearing it in retrospect? Like having your deep thoughts, played back.
Diary. Well, it's interesting because I think it connects a bit to the epiphany that I just had.
This is the first time anyone, I think, has had an epiphany on this podcast.
Listen.
First time for everything, man.
I'm glad to be your first.
Thanks.
You're really gentle. You really helped me get there, man. I appreciate it. I think there's a part of me that sometimes wishes, and I've tried throughout my musical journey and career to write about topical shit or something more narrative or something more abstract. And I feel like the forces of nature and of what pours out of me and what feels right ultimately when I'm creating, it's feel, like I said, and any kind of like strategy that just ruins it.
Sure.
And that's not a novel idea, but it's very true. And so any attempt at being like, oh, I'm going to write this kind of song. And part of what I experienced growing up, part of what I think was difficult was I was and am very sensitive. I pick up a lot of stuff. And I think as an artist, that's a very good place to be.
That's a quality you want.
Absolutely. But it also puts you in a very vulnerable space that sometimes I wish I had some other tools and ways to write, because I sometimes feel like I'm giving away too much, or I'm not sure how other people are going to feel about it who are close to me. There's a lot there, but I really can't go any other direction, and it's what's honest. And I do like to swirl the paints of like metaphor and I stay away from real literal stuff, but at the end of the day, it's I mean, you asked a couple questions and I feel like I haven't answered really any of them, but where does it come from, or what am I writing about? And it's ultimately about relationships, and I mean that in like the broadest
universal sense.
I think it connects to being sensitive and being really affected by the relationships that I have, people with my environment, my wife, past lovers, all that stuff. It's all in there. Ex-bandmates.
I hate you.
It's all swirling around in there, because when I get to that stage of writing, it's when I try other things maybe don't go there. It just doesn't feel authentic. It doesn't feel like what the song is asking for. And certainly some songs are a bit more confessional than others, but that's usually where I go, and I've accepted it. And
it's not a bad quality. It's interesting to me that every time you say the word sensitive, you chuckle a little bit before you say it.
Well, that's that toxic masculinity that's been burrowed into my skull from Farmington High School and football team.
I wonder, from a cultural perspective, a lot of times, the whole discussion around sensitivity, where you feel like people who grew up in more suburban environments are more apt to be okay with exploring thoughts and feelings because they might have access to things like therapy. Absolutely. But maybe not, because a lot of toxic masculinity does seem to come from parts of the country that are not very cosmopolitan.
Sure. I think there's a lot of parallels to a lot of what I think so many of us are uncovering in these current times is the subtle violence. That's way more damaging, and it's like I grew up in a town that was blue, but recognizing that there's a lot of subtle racism and misogyny throughout. Once I started to unpack all that and really look at it, it's pervasive. And I think basically summarizing a lot of things that Malcolm X has pointed out and Martin Luther King, it's that progressive attitude that's a lot more damaging than somebody burning crosses.
Right.
And
I think you see more of that. I've seen significantly more of that. I guess I can't be general there. I've seen more of that than the opposite. It's we want everybody to have equal rights, but y'all can stay over there.
Over there, you can have your equal rights.
Our thing,
yeah. It's been an illuminating year. And plus, I think I was already beginning to open my eyes to this, and then George Floyd just flung the floodgates open for so many of us, and it pushed me further into the work that I do as a teacher in Brooklyn and re-examining what I bring into my classroom every day as a white heterosexual male who fits the description of all the privilege in the world. And it's been frightening, but it ultimately really empowering, and it makes me just reevaluate again, why do I cringe when I say I'm sensitive? Why do I have that knee jerk? I've been digging a lot into my being so precious with what I put out into the world as far as my art and things having to be so crystalline perfect.
Yeah.
And that, it's just another tenet of the same thing. It's just that supremacy just drilled into us, and that grind culture, like, burning out.
Yeah, I got feelings about that, for sure.
Yeah, it's very real, and I feel like I'm just at the tip of the iceberg on unpacking all this stuff. But I think just being able to acknowledge it, and I really appreciate my school community. We have a lot of space to talk about this stuff and to lean into the discomfort and make mistakes and call each other on it, but in a good way, in a sense. Like, if you call me out on stuff, it's because you care about me.
Right. It's not out of malice. It's out of wanting to educate.
Right. Which only happens in like these little small pockets. Mostly like everyone's just livid and angry and want to just fight with each other.
Yeah. They want to, it's projection. But it really does. Sometimes I feel like the work doesn't get done unless there's a positive nurturing. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
Like,
yep.
And then other times I feel like some people need to get beat upside the head a couple of times before they. So I don't know exactly where I stand on.
No, that's a tricky dichotomy, because part of it is I'm willing to do this work and I'm willing to really investigate my inherent racism as a white person, but please do it in the way that best suits me. Be sensitive to me. And I've caught myself with that a lot. And you just move through these stages. And I've certainly been working through that and have been catching myself feeling like, yeah, I'm on board, but be nice to me.
Right. I mean, people don't like hearing negative things about themselves or things that relate to them that can be perceived as negative. But sometimes you can't sugarcoat everything.
No.
And so, yeah, you're right. It is a very strange dichotomy because sometimes it is like, okay, I understand that I need to be sensitive here. And even in my own experiences with misogyny or transphobia or whatever, like there have been times when it's been like, okay, Mike, you said or you did something wrong. And I think every time I've been told it, it's been told out of like wanting to educate as opposed to wanting to lash out.
Right.
But as a sensitive person, it's also kind of like, why are you telling me this? Like, I'm trying the best that I can.
I know. Yep. And that's why it's a really hard road, But it's with so many things, talking about wanting to put music out that's perfect and being afraid to do anything but. Again, it all falls under this thing of where I'm trying to get is to lean into that discomfort and realize most of the beautiful things are there.
Yeah, it's freeing, man.
It really is. And I like to pretend that I'm further along than I am, but I am doing little things. Having finished a record that I'm going to be releasing this summer, I'm in the selling mode, which I hate.
Sure.
I love to make music. I love to make art. I hate to sell music, and I hate to sell art.
But if you plan on making a career out of it, you have to lean into the selling part a little bit.
You have to. And that, for me, has been part of this leaning into the discomfort. I think it came up earlier. I'm humble to a fault with a lot of this stuff. I feel like, okay, you can listen to my music if you want, but like, I totally get if you... Yeah. And again, I think it stems from an anxiety and vulnerability, and maybe it's tied to the kinds of music I make, and are you going to like it? What are people going to think? And those are deep-rooted feelings and responses. So there's a lot there, but I think I'm grateful to be releasing this record at the same time, at this moment in my life. I think it's all coalescing in this way that I'm just becoming comfortable with that anxiety and that comfortability and realizing a lot of it's in my mind and moving through it. And I think there's all the beauty in those blemishes. People actually, I get better responses from the little not polished clips of me working on a song that I'll post that I would never have done in the past than sometimes a finished product.
Sure.
And I think I'm learning more when I take a risk and speak up in a room about something to do with social justice, where I've almost always felt like this is not my conversation, but realizing, yes, this actually is very much my conversation, and it's really on me to speak up and to reflect and to change and to take that step into making those conversations and being a part of that conversation with a very high risk that I'm going to say something stupid or potentially hurtful.
But that's fine.
It is, because that's how you grow.
That's how you learn.
That's how you learn. So that's been big, and it's interesting to have these things happening congruently that are ultimately working to just progress,
And I'm with you there. I know a lot of people who are afraid to take risks.
Yeah.
And that can mean any one of a million different things. And I was like that for a long time. When I was in school, I was never the person who was going to put their hand up because I thought that if I said something, it was going to be an idiotic thing, or just the wrong answer, or whatever it was.
Sure.
So it took many years for me to become confident enough to, metaphorically or for real, stand in front of people and put myself in a situation where I might not have the right answer to this question, and that's cool.
Yeah, but I'm going to say it anyway.
Yeah. Was there a particular thing that got you to that point? And this is another one of those things where it goes a few different ways, where I think most men have a level of confidence that allows them to say dumb shit, but they don't realize the ones that have the confidence to say dumb shit don't realize they're saying dumb shit.
Right.
And the ones that don't have the confidence are maybe the ones who should be speaking out more.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And that's just some weird way of the world shit happening.
Exactly. You're saying something that reminds me of a quote that I'm going to butcher. It's the assholes of the world who think that they're right and don't shut up about it. And it's the people who are willing to start to understand, or I'm definitely butchering this quote.
It's all right.
I'm off the rails, but it's that same idea. Those who don't speak up usually are the ones that have some sort of answer or some sort of light into understanding.
Is it like a politeness thing?
Possibly. I don't know. I'm not sure.
Was there something that led you to this realization? Was there a particular event where you were like, okay, I got to make some changes?
Again, there wasn't an open mic moment.
It's a good analogy. I like that.
Yeah, I'm going to use that now for
an open mic moment.
An open mic moment. This one actually did really feel a lot more organic, and I think it just has a lot to do with my school community where I work. I work really close to here up in the Flatbush area of Brooklyn, and I'm lucky enough to really have a really great community of people who are willing to have these conversations and really think about the subtle impact that you have every day when you're working with kids.
Mm-hmm.
And that is a community I didn't know back in high school, but that's part of the community that I was longing for and that I needed, that I could never name, and I didn't even know it when I first started there, but it felt right. And I've been there for 6 years, and that's, for a charter school, it's a long time to be there, as I think as the world has started to open their eyes to this, small school community has been there along the way, and it's just been really empowering and eye-opening, and each moment allows for a new level of reflection and understanding, like, where is the racism inside of me? Where is the misogyny inside of me? Where is the ableism inside of me? And it's just a matter of being on this journey of being more conscious. Little things, like instead of saying, hey guys, to a group of kids. And it sounds silly, but it doesn't sound silly, but it does to an older version of me.
Right.
And...
or a younger version of you, actually. But
right,
I know what you mean.
An older volume. Yeah. Just trying to be more aware in the language, the vocabulary that I use.
Yeah,
then I'm bigger, and really recognizing this system of white supremacy is huge.
It's funny, I was nodding my head vigorously when you were talking about the you guys thing, because that's something, and I don't remember who pointed it out to me. It's something I've been conscious of for a couple of years. Because the knee-jerk is always to say you guys.
Sure.
It doesn't matter whether you're in mixed company.
You could be in a group of all girls.
All girls. And and say you guys.
Yeah.
So that's one thing I've become very conscious about scrubbing from my vocabulary.
Yeah.
Because it's not inclusive. And you want to be as inclusive as possible in a group of people to make everybody feel welcome. That just seems like basic decency. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. I can't seem to wrap my head around the millions of people who fight back against that concept, because it's so easy ultimately, and it does so much. It brings me back to the topic of where I grew up in my high school. A big thing that's happening in my town right now is they are reevaluating our high school mascot.
Uh-oh, what's your high school mascot?
The Farmington Indians.
Ah, yeah, well, there you go.
Big profile in the gym of Native American warrior, because our whole country is you go far back enough, it's Native American land.
Yes.
But the thing that really gets to me, because against my better judgment, I dip into some Facebook chats and old high school friends.
Jesse.
I know.
It'll drive you so crazy.
I know. I'm getting better, but I think because it's so actually personal, it's harder for me to resist.
I get it.
But yeah, there's people who are just hanging on and arguing against changing it, and I was a farming. They're saying like whitest people like in New England. I'm a Farmington Indian. Like no,
no, you're not.
And and I get flashes. I was on the basketball team, and there were for a time I really loved basketball, and it ultimately was the game was great, but like the group of people I had a really hard time with. But I remember going into games and doing the warm-up drills and the layups and the 3-man weave, and all the kids in the crowd were doing that like tomahawk,
the Atlanta Braves tomahawk chop,
basically.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And again, it's not something. I don't want to pretend that I was this really woke 17-year-old.
Right.
And to be honest, I was probably in the stands of a football game and trying to fit in when was tomahawking along with them. But again, being like 30 years now, 25 years out, and seeing people still like grasping onto it, it's just really strange. And it takes nothing away from you, and it gives so much. It's like wearing a fucking mask. Yeah. It's so easy.
Yeah.
And it does so much. And it's hard. That's a tough thing to like reconcile with.
One thing I don't get, and you might be able to explain this to me, you might not, and it's specifically about sort of suburbia and rural culture, is how do people get their identities so tied up into a mascot?
Yeah, I mean, listen.
They're 20 years after the fact. They're still like, rah!
What is Donald Trump but just a big caricature mascot? What a lot of white people are reckoning with and dealing with in the wrong way is that we never have to fight for our identity. You know what I mean? So many white people see something like Black Lives Matter, and in a way they're kind of like, well, I'm in pain for whatever reason.
Right.
Where's my cause?
Right.
And it ends up being, I love being a Farmington Indian. I love being anti-vax. I love Donald Trump because it's an innate need to belong, to be a part of that group. But to be white and privileged in America means that you didn't have to fight for anything. And you have to invent things to fight for.
Yeah, it's as simple as, something I've brought up a couple of times is looking at me and you. You walk into a room, you're Jesse. I walk into a room, I'm a black guy first.
Yeah.
Then I'm Mike.
Yep.
Maybe.
Right, absolutely.
I don't imagine you wake up in the morning like, I'm a white guy. But I wake up in the morning and my blackness, and to a lesser extent my queerness, informs every single thing that I do throughout the day.
Yes.
It informs my interactions with people. It informs what happens when I swipe my Metro card through the turnstile at the subway station. It informs what I eat for dinner. It informs all of that stuff, consciously or unconsciously.
Sure.
And that is something that in America and most of the world, that whiteness doesn't have to,
No.
It excuses all that.
Yep. I'm trying to find the right words, but it creates an experience on both ends that are vastly different. But at the end of the day, we're all looking for such a similar human experience. And I think if you're not willing to recognize the disparity in those experiences, you just think everyone's the same.
I don't see color.
You know, you just wake up and you do your thing, and it's like you just got to work harder, and all those platitudes.
The world ain't like that, man.
It's not real. And again, it's like, in a way, I'm sort of grateful that I was an outsider to that culture growing up, because I feel like I'm closer to deprogramming a lot of it.
So that actually is a pretty neat segue into fatherhood, because you're a new dad,
Mm-hmm.
you're a girl dad,
Yes.
you're a biracial girl dad.
Mm-hmm.
What is that experience all in the last, I guess, year or so?
Yeah.
What has that been like? Because that's a lot to take in on a normal basis, never mind everything that's going on in the world, and then COVID and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And making music on top of all
I know.
that.
Yeah. No, it's another piece of this grand puzzle that I think I've been touching upon, and we've been touching upon, as the timing of things seems to make sense, and grateful to be aware of the journey that I need to be taking as a person in this world, and specifically as a white male in this world. And I'm grateful that my daughter Nina is here with me at this point, because my eyes are wider to what is out there for her. And yeah, but it's tough, you know. I certainly watched and continue to watch the news cycle of just the last year as my wonderful wife Nicole made her way through pregnancy, and you just, in those spare moments, turn on the news and you're just like, what are we doing? Mm-hmm. And I feel like it's a little cliche to be like, I don't want to have kids because I don't want to bring another. I think that's the cop out and a silly philosophy, but
that's real shit.
It makes its way in,
yeah,
real ways too. And it's just like, this is scary. There's a disease that is killing people across the world. Mm-hmm. People are breaking down our government, which ultimately is not a terrible thing. I just wish it was different people.
Yeah, different people
bringing down the government. Exactly. It's those same idiots.
I feel like it goes back to the politeness conversation from earlier.
Exactly. It's those same idiots who won't shut up who are the ones who are doing it. So that was scary, but it's really hard to talk about my daughter and not fall into a lot of the parent cliche stuff.
Oh, she's so cute.
Oh, she's growing so fast. I say it like all the time. And all right, I just gotta own it. But I think it's also stems from my students, and the conversations that I have. They're 7th graders, are so far advanced than the kinds of conversations I was having at their age with my peers and my teachers. And I think this happens every generation, but there's just a lot of hope that I still really cling to, and I see it in my students, and I see it on their own. They're celebrating Pride Month right now. They're you know,
which is something, I mean,
yeah,
I could not have fathomed in 7th. I mean, I didn't know what Pride Month was until I was 19 or 20.
Yeah.
So
exactly. So yeah, it's those glimmers, and then you look at your daughter, and when I can move through the fear, I am filled with immeasurable amounts of hope for her and what she can do and what will be available to her as we try to progress and be better as a culture and as a people.
Yeah. I mean, that one thing to note is that the world is a lot different now than it was when we were young, and young people have access to information that we would not have dreamed of having in the 80s and 90s, thanks to the internet and social media, that they can challenge the dumb adults in their life and do it intelligently.
Yeah. That's real, and that's what ultimately you're trying to instill at the end of the day. It's like questioning, thinking critically, not accepting what's right there, and pushing back and discovering yourself. So more than anything, I'm just so fascinated and meeting this person. And obviously the parenting side of things is so crucial, and we're reading all the books and following all the YouTubers and whatever it is to do right by her. But ultimately it's get out of the way. You know, show her some great music and read her some amazing books, but get out of the way.
Yeah.
And just and I can't wait to meet her and continue to just see what she brings, and that's it.
It's ongoing, right? Like, it's who Jessie is hasn't fully developed yet.
Right.
The same way who your daughter is going to take a lifetime to develop. It doesn't stop at 18 or 21 or 30 or whatever it is. Like, it's continual work in progress.
I like that. Perhaps another epiphany is upon me. You might have got a twofer.
I don't think we can do two epiphanies in one episode, Jesse. We have to bring you back for the second epiphany.
Yeah. No, I think it was definitely precipitated by COVID and the lockdown. Just a re-examination. And in that re-examination of all things, but mostly internally, and what's most important, and how do I want to spend my time, and what relationships are worthy and which ones aren't, and all those things, I think we were finally given some space to think about. And for me, it's like so many things are coalescing. This record I'm about to release that I really was able to finish in lockdown.
Right.
Lockdown really afforded that. And it does feel very much, as I close in at the end of my 30s, like a very new chapter. And I like this idea of growing up with my kid. You know what I mean? I hadn't really thought of it like totally like that. And so it's like we're on these parallel lines. And we've got a lot to learn from each other.
Yeah, man.
And I think that's another like tenet I've been able to capture from teaching, like those weird power dynamics that probably you grew up with. It's not part of my practice, and luckily it's not. And it's not part of our school's sort of vibe. And it's just about building relationships and figuring each other out, and knowing that there's no stop in the growth and the learning. And so being on this like parallel line with my daughter Nina feels like a cool way to think about it. So thank you.
Thank you.
What insurance do you take?
Oh man, that's so weird. I'm like, when did I become Dr. Mike all of a sudden? Holy shit.
I recently had 2 different therapy sessions in one day, which is not...
That's unusual.
It's a little unusual.
With 2 different therapists?
I'm really outing myself here. I won't go into the backstory of it, and it's not usually what happens, but I feel like I'm in a very therapeutic zone.
Sure.
Just this week.
Okay.
I mean, like, a lot. And it, started to try to meditate and be mindful and get into that practice. I think this time feels like I'm really a lot more ready. I keep saying that, but this one feels good.
You can stop and restart. I feel the same way about meditation.
Yeah.
I'll start and then I'll stop. And even some people I've interviewed for this have been like, dude, it's not a race. It's not something you win at. It's not something you become the best at. When you feel like meditating, meditate. If you miss it, don't beat yourself up. Just pick it back up when you're ready to pick it back up.
My big takeaway for meditation is what is going to help me this time around. I remember a lot of times thinking, a lot of us get in our minds of what meditation is and what it should be is sort of like Siddhartha under the lotus tree.
Oh yeah.
Reaching nirvana in that state. And so I've spent a lot of times meditating, thinking like I'm working towards, in this moment, reaching this state where I finally turn off my brain, this incessant voice that continues to talk. I finally get to turn it off, and like I'm in the cosmos. And I think the switch in how I want to approach this now, and reading a bit more and trying to understand it, really it's the meditating is the practice, and to get the tool for when I'm in a situation where I would usually get really upset or angry and maybe be hurtful to my wife or to a coworker or something, having the practice brings me the nirvana in that moment where it actually matters.
Right.
Who cares if I'm in the cosmos when I'm alone in the dark?
Right.
It doesn't serve really anybody. What I'm realizing now is, no, it's building a skill set so that when I get triggered by a comment that I take too personally, if you didn't know, I'm kind of sensitive.
I did not figure that out.
All right, but I'm letting you know now that when I feel that knee jerk to be really sensitive, the meditation, that's where I find bliss. And it's not like this hour-long nirvana. It's like, no, you take a moment to chill out.
Right.
This isn't about you, man.
I'm going to disengage.
I'm going to disengage. I'm going to separate myself a bit from this emotion, this feeling, whatever it is. It's temporary. It doesn't even really exist. It's just here. So I sound like I'm some guru now, at least to myself.
It's
but
real. It's so real.
It was another sort of understanding that I think is helping me feel like, okay, I think I understand now what the point is. Because I think a lot of times I would stop because I was like, I'm not getting it.
Yeah.
I can't even sit Indian style. There I go. Indian style. Oh my
That's
gosh.
something you don't, yeah.
All
You cannot sit cross-legged.
No, exactly. I cannot sit cross-legged, so I can't do this. But that's not,
silly.
It's not what it is. And so it's just all part of this next chapter of learning and growth.
Love it. It's what we should all aspire to.
Hey, work in progress.
As we all are, man. We're all works in progress. That's something that's important to know. And I think if you realize that, it'll help you give grace to people who may not be as far along on their journey as we are or as we think we are. We're all faulty people. None of us is perfect. We all certainly make mistakes. And again, I think that giving grace is sort of the best thing that we can do within reason. I'm still from Brooklyn, and you give people a reasonable leash. You don't let people walk all over you or prove their stupidity to you time and time again. But I think if people are willing to learn, if people are willing to do better, then you give them the space to do better. And it's important for me personally to consistently do better. So thank you, Jesse, for sharing your journey with us. His debut album comes out August 13th, so make sure you're on the lookout for that. You can go to lessersparrow.com and find out more about Jesse. And I missed an opportunity when I did not ask him what Lesser Sparrow meant. How did I forget to do that? You can also follow him on Instagram at lesser_sparrow. Looking forward to hearing your music, Jesse, and wishing you all the best. Thanks again for listening to this episode. We really hope that you stick around and listen to future episodes or past episodes if you feel so inclined. You can obviously listen to Detoxicity on the podcast platform of your choosing. And if you want to get in touch with me, please hit me up on Instagram at DetoxPodGuy, Twitter, @TizMikeJoseph, or you can email me at detoxpod@gmail.com. Always willing to hear constructive criticism, thoughts, ideas, realizations, and if you yourself would like to be a guest on the show or you know somebody who would make a good guest, I will take recommendations from now until the end of time, so please feel free to reach out to me. I want to thank a couple of people who've been very important to this show. Calvin Williams composed the music that you hear at the beginning and end of every episode. Jacob Block composed the logo, or created the logo, for the show. And I want to give a special shout out to Andrew Grossman and Jeff Giles for providing inspiration for me to come up with this idea and bring it to fruition. Once again, thank you all for listening. I really, really appreciate it, and take care of yourselves. Peace.